Welcome everyone to lesson number 19, where we're going to be talking about filtering by aggregate functions, as well as one bonus topic. So don't skip this one if you are already familiar with filtering by aggregate functions, because you'll learn something new. So here's what you're going to learn in this one. You're going to learn why standard filtering does not work with aggregate functions. Again, aggregate functions are what we just learned about in the previous lesson, and they're all about things like using a max, a min, average, count, sum, etc. And you're going to learn why, like I said, standard filtering doesn't work with those, and what the proper way is to filter the aggregate function data. And like I mentioned, as a bonus, we're going to be talking about advanced queries, including control flow functions. Okay, this is sort of a bonus topic because it sort of cropped up in my example, and in order for me to properly explain the example that I chose in this one, I'm going to have to use some advanced queries. So you're going to learn a little bit of stuff here. It might spin your head a little bit, but stick with me because it's definitely cool stuff to learn. So to dive into this topic, let's say that we have received a request from our bank manager. So here's what they asked. They say, I want to know which of our customers have a bank account balance greater than $80. Okay, so for whatever reason, this particular bank account manager wants to do an audit on all the bank accounts, and they want to know just those customers who have a bank account balance greater than $80. So it seems like an innocent enough question to ask, but how can we actually accomplish this task of giving them the answer to their question? Well, when we dissect this question, we see that we need some grouping. Okay, makes sense because we see that we're going to need to group this query by customers because they want to know which of the customers have a bank account. So immediately you say, okay, customers, we'll have to group by the customers to know, based on those particular individual customers, which of them have a balance greater than $80. So when we group by customers, we also need to group by transaction types. Okay, because the transaction types are all about some are positive, some are negative, so to speak. You'll see that's actually not true in a moment, but credit transactions are transactions that put money in your bank account, and debit transactions are transactions that take money away from your account. So once we group them by customer as well as by transaction types, then we need to sum everything up, to add everything up, and figure out if there's at least $80 remaining. All right? So to properly solve this problem, we'll need to just update our transactions table schema right now to include this customer information. Because as it stands right now, there's no customer information in our table. So let's do that little tweak. So what I did was I added a new field called bank account ID. So you see here at the very bottom, bank account ID. And this column will just allow us to distinguish which transaction belongs to which customer. Okay, so a bank account ID is just a representation of a particular bank account, and for this scenario, we can assume that every single customer has their own unique bank account ID and not more than one bank account ID. Okay, that's not something that I put into this as a restriction, but that's just something that we'll assume going forward. So here's what here's what our new data will actually look like. So here we have all the same rows and all the same columns, except for we've added one new column, which is the bank account ID. And all I did was I just iterated through 3 different customers. I just did 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 because I lack creativity, and that just gives an equal distribution of all the credits and debits. Okay, so each customer here, customer 1, 2, 3, or bank account 1, 2, 3, get their own credit transactions, as well as each of them get 2 debit transactions. So, having said that, having seen our new schema, let's keep things as simple as possible and try to filter our results where the sum is greater than $80, because that's the answer to the question that we want to give, is who has more than $80 in their account after all is said and done, after all the transactions are tallied up. So what we do is we could say select bank account ID, transaction type, and the sum of the amount from transactions where the sum of the amounts is greater than $80, and then we do our grouping. So you see here, it's important to note that we first group by bank account ID, and then we group by transaction type. The order here matters. So it will group by bank account ID first, and then by transaction type second, which makes sense because we want to group by customers first. If you remember our question, we want to know which customers have at least $80 in their account. So having said that, it makes sense that we group by customers first, which is represented by bank account ID. And then next we want to filter, or rather group by transaction type, because our transactions, like I said, some will be positive impact towards our bank accounts, and some of them will be negative or have negative impacts towards our bank account total. All right. So it looks like this could work, but believe it or not, it doesn't, because there's one small catch. You cannot use aggregate functions in a where clause. Okay, so here's the where clause in question. We say where sum of the amount is greater than 80. We are not allowed to do this. In the where clause, you can only put, non-function type operations. You can only have regular old columns inside of a where clause. So this is not a column. This is actually an aggregate function, and that doesn't work. So here's the error that you'll get. It'll say MySQL database error, invalid use of the group function. Okay, kind of an ambiguous type of message to give, but indeed that's the error that we're going to get, and what it means is that the where clause is not good enough. So what's the workaround? What can we do to fix this problem? And the solution comes in the having keyword. So let's dive into this having keyword and see how that will solve our problems. So let's restructure our query. We'll leave it exactly the same as it was before, except we're going to take out our troublesome line, which was the where clause. So you see here that the where clause is missing, but we've replaced it with a having clause. So instead of saying select bank account ID, transaction type, and sum of the amount from transactions, where sum amount is greater than 80, we no longer have that. Instead, we have this having sum of the amount greater than 80. Okay, and that will solve our problem. So remember, when we want to filter by aggregate function, so if we want to filter by a sum, or filter by the min, or filter by the average, we'll need to use the having keyword. And the having keyword should appear after the group by. At least I believe that's true. You always need to group by first and then say having second. Okay. So a helpful tip here is that you can also assign names. These are called aliases to your aggregate functions, like so. So what we can do here is we can say select bank account ID, transaction type, sum amount as total. Okay, and I've underlined it and bolded it here just to emphasize that this is an alias. Obviously, you won't need to underline it when you're typing it into your actual IDE or whatever, whenever you're doing your SQL scripting. That is, what it's saying is it's assigning an alias to this particular field. So instead of having to say, having some amount greater than 80, you can say having total greater than 80. Okay, it just saves you some typing, and what it'll do also is this will show up in the results when we actually run this. It won't show up as some amount, it'll show up as total. Okay, so it'll say bank account ID, transaction type, total. Okay, so it's also helpful for the end result when you get the results back from the database. So, okay, that's just a quick tip for you. Moving on, I think I'm going to hit pause on this lesson and sort of split this one up into two parts because I've already been talking for a little while. So let's hit the pause button, and we're not done yet. We still need to answer our boss's question, the original question. So let's hit pause. Let's move on to the next lesson, which will be part 2 of this lesson, where we can actually continue our journey along the having keyword. So stick with it. See you in the next lesson, and bye for now.